These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Our book today is The End of the Myth, From the Frontier to the Border Wall in the Mind of America by Greg Grandin. And this is from Chapter 1, titled All That Space. The British colonies in North America were conceived in expansion. America was an aspiration, an errand, and an obligation born out of violent Christian schism and Europe's interminable religious and imperial conflicts. Depending on the intricacies of their particular interpretations of Revelation, the Protestants who settled New England might have understood flight across the Atlantic as a way of escaping European war, or they might have seen migration as a chance to open a new front and win those wars on a new soil. Here in the 1600s, in the eschatological nebula of the New World, was the first paradoxical image of America as simultaneously pristine and despoiled, empty and at the same time filled with primitives begging for deliverance, subordinated to Catholic Spain, which had conquered its part of the Americas a century earlier and stood as the great obstacle to Reformation England's rise as a world power. All yell and cry with one voice, Libertia, Libertia, Richard Hakluyt, a clergyman and court minister, wrote in the late 1500s, hoping to convince investors and his queen to establish an American colony. As Puritan society frayed under the harsh conditions of settler life, the frontier threatened and beckoned. The dark woods were filled with witches, and they were witchy, inviting hither. The forest was the place where the community could be redeemed and given new purpose, a chance to once again start anew, or it could be a place of more sorrows, wilderness sorrows, as two early Puritan patriarchs described the hardships that awaited those who ventured into uncharted territory, where whatever solidarity existed would be smashed into atoms as settlers scattered to escape the rule of the clergy. People are ready to run wild into the woods again and to be as heathenish as ever, warned Increase Mather. Expansions could be, often in the same sermon, held up as the cause of and the solution to the difficulties of establishing Christian communities. Either way, Native Americans had to get out of the way. They could die. They waste, they molder away, they disappear, said one Puritan chronicler of indigenous people who had succumbed to European pestilence years before the arrival of the Mayflower in 1620, thus clearing the earth for the establishment of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. God made way for his people by removing the heathen and planting them in the ground, said another observer. They could be murdered. The holy terror unleashed by the Puritans was, according to the historian Bernard Bailyn, driven by fears of what could happen to civilized people in an unimaginable wilderness and fears of racial conflicts in which God's children were fated to struggle with pitiless agents of Satan, pagan antichrists swarming in the world around them. Survivors could be enslaved. The first patent granted in colonial America in 1626 was to a Virginia merchant and planter, William Claiborne, for inventing a device that would not just restrain Indians, but also make them work. Claiborne was given an Indian to experiment on for the trial of his invention. Colonial records do not say what this innovation might have been, only noting that it was not successful. Or they could be pushed further and further west. The prodigious and relentless population, complained New Orleans Spanish governor in 1794, progressively drives the Indian nations before them and upon us, seeking to possess for itself this vast continent which the Indians occupy between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Appalachian Mountains. More than a century and a half later, writing in the early 1950s, the Mexican author and diplomat Octavio Paz made much the same point. America was, he writes, if anything, geography, pure space, open to human action. Since it lacked historical substance, ancient social classes, established institutions, religions, and hereditary laws, reality presented no obstacles other than natural ones. Men struggled not against history, but against nature. And wherever there was an historical obstacle, indigenous societies say, it was simply erased from history, reduced to a mere natural fact, and dispensed with accordingly. Evil is outside, part of the natural world, like Indians, rivers, mountains, and other obstacles that must be domesticated or destroyed. End of quote. The American Revolution is a permanent revolution, Paz went on, a nonstop expulsion of, quote, all elements foreign to the American essence, and a constant invention of itself. And anything that stands in the way of that invention, anything that is in any way irreducible or inassimilable to perpetual creation, be it Native American, Spanish America, or history itself, quote, is not American. Quote, in other places, the future is one of man's attributes, because we are men, we have a future. In Saxon America, the process is inverted, and the future determines the man. We are men because we are the future, and everything that has no future is not a man. End of quote. The United States, Paz said, offers no room for contradictions, ambiguity, or conflict. The nation flies forward swiftly, as if weightless, across the land. Trying to stop North Americans moving west, Stephen Austin, the founder of Texas, said over a century earlier, was like trying to stop the Mississippi with a dam of straw. The drive west waxed and waned and burst forward with great passion during key moments. The book, The Edge of the Myth, by Greg Grandin.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, happy Sean's birthday, whatever it may be for you. Yes, it's Taurus week, month, whatever, 2 weeks, I guess, out of May, 2 weeks out of April.
Happy birthday, Tom, tomorrow.
Let's not go there. A lot to talk about today, and of course, Anything Goes Friday, whatever you'd like to call about. It's just you and me for 3 full hours here. We're going to have a great time. There is a lot in the news. I'll just fill you in on what we're going to cover over the 3 hours of the program, and then give you a little information, and then pick up your phone calls. So, Louisiana wants to be the first state to officially send women to prison, or perhaps even put them to death. They do have the death penalty in Louisiana for getting abortions. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Senate Republicans are making it plain that they are intending to propose, Joni Ernst talking about this, a federal ban on abortions so that no state can say, oh yeah, you can have an abortion here. No, it's gonna have to be, you're gonna have to go to Canada. And also in our first hour, free speech. Why is the Supreme Court getting a buffer zone when they denied them to abortion clinics in a 2014 decision? I'll tell you about that in just a moment. In our second hour, I want to get into my rant today over at HartmannReport.com, titled, Is Democracy in the Workplace Having a Moment?
And it's about what's going on with the union movement. We talked about this at some length yesterday, but this is, quite a topic. Also, the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, is considering challenging a 1982 Supreme Court ruling. Why? Because let's change the subject from abortion, please. Let's talk about, Mexicans or something. Which is, I'll fill you in the second hour. Also, in our Geeky Science in the second hour, if meatless Mondays catch on, they could literally save our forests. They could stop deforestation. And the numbers are shocking. One less day of meat a week and a 50% reduction in deforestation. I'll tell you about that and give you all the details in the second hour. In the third hour of our program, the once unthinkable event is happening. We're still waiting for some votes, but it looks like the French left, from the Greens to the Socialists to the French Communist Party, the whole French left, are forming a coalition to challenge former investment banker Emmanuel Macron in Parliament. Macron is trying to raise the retirement age from 62 up to 65. He's trying to make neoliberal reforms, as it were, and increasingly the world is friggin' sick and tired of neoliberalism. And also in the third hour, we have a crazy alert. Donald Trump suggested a secret missile strike on Mexico. Yes, when he was president. Yes, his Pentagon is the last Senate-confirmed Secretary of Defense is telling all in a new book. I'll tell you about that in the third hour of the program. But just to start out, also a little bit of the news. We just got the economic numbers from the Department of Labor. The economy added 428,000 jobs in April. What was expected was 391,000. So the economy is rolling along, or at least employment is rolling along. Inflation, of course, is a problem, but the jobless rate has held steady at 3.6%. The job growth was widespread. The most rapidly growing industry was hospitality. Leisure and hospitality, they gained 78,000 new jobs. On the other hand, fascinating piece over at the Financial Times about there's a broad consensus across business leaders that, yes, a recession is coming. After all, a Democrat is up for, Democrats are up for election in 2022, and a Democratic president is up for re-election, or at least there's going to be a presidential election in 2024, and you've got a Republican in charge of the Fed. It's time for a recession. And so the Financial Times called a whole bunch of CEOs and said, what do you think about this? Airbnbs, Brian Chesney says, more people are struggling with their rents and their mortgages, so they will turn to hosting paying guests. So it's going to be good for Airbnb. Scott Miracle-Gro's CEO said, people keep buying paint and lawn care items. After all, they're unemployed, they can, or whatever. When the recession comes, there will be a drop in employment. So they have more time to paint their house. Door-to-door protein shakes. The Herbalife chief, John DeSimone, says, based on the last 100 years of direct selling, it's been very counter-cyclical. In other words, when the economy goes south, when you get a recession and people lose their jobs, they start going door-to-door selling Herbalife. What about burglar alarms? ADT chief financial officer Jeffrey Lickassar says, in recessions, people tend to be more concerned about things like safety and security. Why? Well, because there's more people trying to break into their house because there's more unemployment and people are desperate. Dating websites. Match Group chief executive Sharmshida Dubey says, we've seen increased engagement during times of anxiety and trouble. So business is already looking forward to a recession. What are we going to do about that? All right, Louisiana. This is amazing. In response to the Supreme Court's leaked draft opinion that it's time to criminalize abortion, or trying to allow states to criminalize abortion, Louisiana wants to be the first. They want to be the first state to put a woman to death for getting an abortion. This is over at The Advertiser, a newspaper in Louisiana. And just a straight read of it, a Louisiana legislative committee on Wednesday advanced a bill to make abortion the crime of homicide, in which the mother, as well as those assisting her in terminating the pregnancy, can be charged with murder. It passed the House Appropriations Committee on a 7-2 vote. Its sponsor, this is House Bill 813 in Louisiana, its sponsor, Representative Danny McCormick, says that we can't wait. We can't wait on the Supreme Court. And the guy who actually helped author the bill is Reverend Brian Gunter of the First Baptist Church in Livingston, Louisiana. Yes, they actually hired a preacher Separation of church and state? No, not so much. They hired a preacher to write the bill. And he's out going, yeah, let's put those women to death. No, actually, his specific quote was, no compromises, no more waiting. Right. Meanwhile, in their commitment to killing people, the Republicans just one of these Republican candidates, Andrew Wilhoit, just won a spot Tuesday as one of 3 Republican candidates in the race for the seat of the Clinton Township Board. The 40-year-old Wilhoit has been incarcerated in the Boone County Jail since last March, when he murdered his wife and dropped her body over the side of a bridge. The Indiana Election Division explained that under Indiana law, Republicans who are charged with murder are still allowed to run for any office in the state. His wife had just successfully undergone chemo treatment and had filed for a divorce when he killed her, or is alleged to have killed her. He has confessed, by the way, but he's still running for public office from jail. And at the federal level, now Republicans are, now you've got in Louisiana, let's put women to death for getting abortions. Now at the federal level, Joni Ernst is saying, hey, that sounds like a good idea to us. And Mitch McConnell is not happy about it. Mitch McConnell came out and said to the Republican caucus, to all the Republican senators, stop talking about abortion. 3/4 of America wants abortion to remain legal. And this is not going to help us in the election. And so his exact quote was, not a leaked draft, but the fact that the draft was leaked. In other words, don't talk about the draft, the draft Supreme Court decision. Don't talk about that. Talk about the fact that it was leaked. It's interesting. Yesterday afternoon, I was interviewed for a podcast for Talkers Magazine about, which is the kind of the Bible of the talk radio industry. About this issue, about abortion. And the fellow who interviewed me told me that, Michael Harrison, the publisher of the magazine, told me that the conservative that he had just interviewed on the same issue, had basically put the centerpiece of his argument about, oh my God, it's a leak. And I'm like, yeah, that's because the Republican Study Committee sent out a memo to all the Republicans saying, don't talk about abortion, talk about the leak. So anyhow, that's Mitch McConnell's message, but Joni Ernst is not on message. She's like, we need to discuss what the role of the federal government will be in this, she told NBC News yesterday. She's also a member of the Republican Party's leadership. She says Senate Republicans are weighing whether Congress should enact abortion restrictions nationwide. We're debating it right now, Ernst said. Senator Ted Cruz was a little more decisive. He said, I have supported numerous federal bills. Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, he says, just take my state of North Dakota. Having a North Dakota child killed in the womb in Fargo versus Moorhead, Minnesota, on the other side of the Red River, I don't find much solace in that just because it didn't happen in my state. In other words, he's the senator from North Dakota, but he doesn't want abortions to happen in Minnesota. So as a United States senator, he's all in on legislation that will say to Minnesota, you may be a blue state, you may think that abortion should remain legal. Tough luck. McConnell said, so Mitch McConnell again came out and said, you people shouldn't be talking about this. And the way that he said this time was he said, we are going to preserve the filibuster if we take the Senate after this election. In other words, it's going to take 60 votes to criminalize abortion nationwide, and the Democrats won't let that happen. So y'all can stop talking about it. He's getting kind of desperate here, It's like, please stop talking about this. Joni Ernst, put a sock on, in your mouth. Come on, it's enough of this already. But Kevin Cramer and Joni Ernst and Ted Cruz, they are giddy. Oh boy, we can put women in jail. They've been wanting to do that since the Salem witch trials were over. It is 17 minutes past the hour. As I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. You and me for 3 hours. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of this break.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Rich in Eugene, Oregon. Hey, Rich, thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. First, I want you to know that Greg Clapper also says hello.
Oh, great. Where am I remembering Greg Clapper from?
Apparently, you guys worked together in radio in Portland.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Okay.
You bet. Well, like you, Tom, I've been a progressive for a long, long time, remaining totally committed to two priorities, one political, one personal, getting corporate control off our backs, and especially now ending the deep divisions that keep us at each other instead of with each other. On the political side, let me suggest how we can shift power from the moneyed elites, as Roosevelt called them, to us. And I promise, Tom, it will be quick, believe it or not. Given the political reality that our current defensive strategy of resistance is not getting us to a progressive future, what's obviously needed is progressive power that can actually compete with corporate power. And the way to acquire it is with a national multiracial electoral organization.
We have one. It's called the Democratic Party. It's got $1 billion budget. It's got hundreds of thousands of people involved with it. It's got thousands of employees and
right.
Tens of thousands of volunteers.
Run by and for corporate interests. And
not entirely.
This organization I'm talking about would, for the first time, be led by a united central progressive command with regional coordinators, north, south, east, and west, that are planning and facilitating and providing resources to our candidates around the country. In most general terms is what to do. We have to build the organization if we take ourselves seriously as progressives. The thing is, how do we do it? How do we get it off the ground and make it real? And we do it by starting with very doable progressive unity summits in each state that are linked together under a national umbrella that allow us to finally apply our collective power. And this new national alliance, directed by a unified progressive headquarters and launched in each state, is how we finally compete and succeed against corporate rule. If someone has a better idea, let's hear it. As Bernie has said, the only way to beat organized money is with organized people. And that's what this recommended offensive electoral strategy is about. And by the way, Tom, this can be a significant revenue source for free speech TV by helping to facilitate a new and unique nationwide progressive alliance.
Okay. Rich, every time I've seen anybody do this or try to do this, and I remember these debates from SDS from the 60s, for God's sake. I mean, this goes way, way back. You end up with factions. You end up with people fighting over what's going to be what. How are we going to fund it? Where's the money? Oh, this guy is too far off to the left. That one's not far enough. That's why you've got this whole spectrum already in the Democratic Party. Why not just try to take over the Democratic Party, get more progressives inside the Democratic Party rather than start a new organization from the ground up? It has never worked. I've seen at least 3 different serious tries at this.
Well, I'm totally with you on progressives taking over the Democratic Party, but in the way Bernie approached it, running as a registered...
He started an organization. It's called Our Revolution. It's still out there.
I know it's out there, and it needs to be more out there. And
but see,
we have to advocate for a progressive future, yes, but we have to win at every level, particularly in the House and the Senate, and we need to do it with progressive majorities in all of it.
Okay. Well, Rich, good luck on this, and when you've got your organization together, let me know. I'd love to know about it. 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2018, Pastor Dave Barnhart of the St. Juania United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, delivered a sermon that is worth revisiting. He said, "The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated, unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or the chronically poor. They don't resent your condescension or complain that you're not politically correct. Unlike widows, they don't ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, or childcare. Unlike aliens, they don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they're born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. It's almost as if, by being born, they have died to you. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth or power. The whole clip is over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Rex in Tacoma. Hey, Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Rex, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. Happy Friday.
Thank you.
The question that Ted Kennedy asked, when is the rich have enough?
Yeah, when does the greed stop?
Where it doesn't, and they keep moving the goalposts. That's what's causing inflation. Every time they give a raise to a worker, they raise the price of their product, and which increases their income. There has to come a point where they give raises to the workers and then accept that they have to make a little bit less, but that'll never happen.
Well, it'll never happen as long as the top tax rate is at 28%. There's so many loopholes that your average billionaire is paying less than 3%. Yes.
Yeah, so
it'll also never happen as long as you can compensate executives with stock. That's another thing that Reagan legalized that never should have happened.
Yeah, so it enables them to keep moving the goalposts. Every time we get a raise, the workers, then they raise the price of products, and it's a never-ending cycle.
Right.
I just wanted to point that out.
I agree. Rex, excellent pointing. Thank you very much. Alejandro in Miami. Hey, Alejandro, what's on your mind today?
No, hey, Tom, I just wanted to throw out a theory with regards to the leak of the overturning Roe versus Wade decision. I think it's obviously a bad idea to overturn Roe versus Wade, because it obviously affects all women, especially Republican mistresses. I mean, that's going to be very inconvenient if they can't get an abortion. So
well, the Republican mistresses will still be able to hop on a private jet to Switzerland. They won't have a problem,
Well, I'm glad they're so nice.
They're not worried. I'm serious. Republicans are mostly wealthy white men and women, and wealthy people in the United States will not be inconvenienced, even if Louisiana makes it a crime punishable by murder. Republican, wealthy people will not be inconvenienced. Like I said, they'll just hop on a plane and go someplace else.
Well, I also want to talk about the Louisiana law, but I guess, Mike, let me throw out this theory about the Supreme Court leak that maybe, that was done on purpose, Supreme Court leak by the court, to test the waters to see how people were going to get pissed. And if they got really pissed, as predicted, they're going to be like, okay, let's dial it back, Alito. Let's just go with just a minor editing, a minor trimming of abortion rights. Let's not go full-blown crazy and overturning Roe versus Wade, because that's just a stupid idea.
Yeah, or let's take Matthew Hale out of this thing. And the guy who is executing women as witches. Let's no longer quote him.
Oh, God, I don't know. Yeah, I know. It's so stupid. I mean, the whole overturning Roe versus Wade is just a bad idea. It's just,
if you look at the footnotes in this decision, Alito quotes himself 6 times. In all the legal scholars he's quoting. He quotes women only 5 times.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah. The vast majority of them are men. All the scholars he quotes. Anyhow, back to you, Alejandro. We have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, and I also want to say that a big problem, this reminds me of criminal law with the Louisiana proposal to, make it a murder to do an abortion. The problem is that murder under the common law is a killing of a human being against another human being, but that's legally, throughout common law, you were not considered a human being until you came out of the womb and you were born.
Right.
So how are they going to redefine murder to include that? That's a very vague. And
well, I think they'll write that right into the statute, the definition of when human life begins.
Yeah, I just think it's just a stupid idea. It's just going to turn into a philosophical debate in court of when does life begin, and no judge wants to deal with that.
Yeah, it's going to get very messy. Alejandro, thank you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It is Anything Goes Friday, and I'll be back with more of your calls right after this short break.
For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here. John in Rockland, Massachusetts. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I've never called before. I'm an old guy. I'm about the same age as Biden. I've been a liberal Democrat all my life, and I have a question for you. Who do you think is the most universally admired and loved American? I think in the past of people like Amelia Earhart and Lindbergh and Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle. Can you think of anyone today who is, as I say, universally admired and loved by most Americans? Because I think that Biden, if he runs for re-election, I don't think he has a chance. I think if he feels the same way I feel at my age, he should not be president. And I just wonder who you see on the horizon who might take over the reins of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. I don't know, John. I mean, many of the people that you mentioned were sports figures or people who were iconic because of singular moments in American history that had very little to do with partisan politics. And I'm not sure that, 15 years ago, you could have answered that question with Oprah, for example. In fact, there were people who were trying to push her. But
I have thought of Oprah. I've thought of Michelle Obama.
Yeah, but I don't think, none of those people are going to work. I think that there's a very real possibility that we're going to have a contested primary in 2024.
I hope we do, frankly.
I'm ambivalent about it. On the one hand, I hope we do in as much as I want there to be a really strong Democratic candidate. On the other hand, sometimes a primary, there's this, I don't know if it's mythology or if it's an actual accurate theory that had Ted Kennedy not challenged Jimmy Carter in 1980 in the primary and pointed out that Jimmy Carter was starting to embrace neoliberalism and all this other stuff, that Carter probably could have beaten Ronnie Reagan.
Right.
You can flip a coin on that one, but my sense of it is that Kamala Harris has not caught fire. I think she's a good person. She's a good politician. She's making a great vice president. And she's got 2 years to grow into the job and raise her profile substantially, and she's going to have to do that. I
don't think that's going to work. I think she's already damaged goods, frankly.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But I agree with you about Joe Biden being too old, basically, is the bottom line. My personal preference would be Elizabeth Warren. I think it is time for a woman to be president. There are a number of good candidates, and John, you've kind of opened a topic here. So not that we need a topic on Anything Goes Friday. You can call about anything you want, but maybe other people have suggestions. But even the discussion kind of presupposes that it won't be either Harris or Biden, which offends a lot of Democrats. So we'll see where it goes. But John,
I've had one thought over the years, and again, it goes back to the Ronald Reagan example. I think Tom Hanks would be a terrific candidate.
Yeah, but again, whenever you pick a celebrity, then you start digging into their lives and you discover that, they're not vettable, or they've got all kinds of, skeletons in their closet or whatever. So, John, I totally understand what your perspective and what you're trying to figure out here. I don't think there's an easy answer right now. Let's let political evolution take its course. George in Chicago. Hey, George, you're on the air. What's up?
Oh, man, you're up, and I'm trying to stay up with you. Well, are you there?
I am. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. You inspired this piece that I'm about to read to you, because it's dealing with the way the universe started, and you were talking to another gentleman a week or so ago, and he and you were saying how you projected how you thought the universe began and what might have happened afterwards.
Yeah. George, if I could say before you start, we discourage people from reading on the air because unless you're a professional at it, it's sometimes hard to follow. It would be better if you could just summarize it in your own words, unless it's really, really short.
It's really, really short.
Okay,
and
go for it.
It's not, okay. Please let me finish this, because the end is the most important. It's from the Big Bang until now, throughout the universe, space and time, it's known as dark matter. Dark matter is everywhere, but cannot be seen. Only recognized how it moves within everything and everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't even considered, in my rant the other day, I didn't even talk about dark matter, but I wonder if dark matter is that stuff that is the stuff that everything's made of, or a manifestation of it,
Yes, it is. That's what this is about. Could I finish it, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
No, I'm sorry. It's within everything and everybody. Relentless. At present, it's named dark, sometimes black matter. Ain't that funny how black lives matter?
Sweet. George, thank you. Thank you. That's a poem worthy of publication. I appreciate the call. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's on your mind?
Hey,
Hey.
Now, you spoke about this some time ago, and I was listening to another station. They was talking about the splitting up of this country, the North and South going their separate ways.
Right.
And there's so many instances where we see that we're not going to change the minds of individuals when they're set on doing what they want to do. The question I had is, how could that be done, the splitting up, and who is going to pay for the military? Because we're still going to need a military. The social safety net could be split up because these southern states still don't believe in a social safety net for their people, and that would be it would be other problems, but that military part, because I can't convince you that 1 + 1 = 3. They're not going to accept the fact that life don't begin at inception. So because we have major differences, we have some things in common, but we have some major differences that we're not going to get past. And the separation thing is what I'm really concerned about. How could that work if we split up?
Well, let me throw another wrench into the monkey wrench into the discussion here, Tyrone, and that is that in every single red state there are blue cities. Houston and Dallas are solid blue, as is San Antonio, as is New Orleans, as is Miami, as is Tampa. I mean, the big cities of the South.
You have red and blue together.
Well, yeah. Well, my point is that the engine. First of all, your red states are typically economically nowhere near as strong as blue states, number one. Number two, they consume far more federal money than they send to the federal government and all that sort of stuff. But that's because it's the rural red areas that are poor, that don't make much, that don't produce much, and that suck down disproportionate amounts of welfare, of Social Security, of Medicare, of Medicaid, everything right across the board. And so if you were going to say, okay, we're going to separate out the South because, they keep voting for Republicans, what you would discover is that you're separating out very, very large numbers of people who are very, very blue, who are very democratic, who are very progressive. And, just because you've got a whole bunch of rural people, and in many of these states, it's not even the majority of the people. I mean, you got a couple of states now, Tennessee, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, where you've got, when the entire state gets to vote, they elect Democrats. The only reason their legislatures are controlled by Republicans is because of gerrymandering. This is minority rule in these states, and it's minority rule of the rural areas over the cities. And so the real divide, and this is the real divide in America. I mean, I live in a very blue state, right? Oregon. 4/5 of the state is bright red. We've got a couple of really big blue cities, Portland, Eugene, with a campus, a college town, Salem, the state capital, and the whole rest of the state is red. So the divide in America is not so much north-south, although it appears that way, and not so much blue-red. It's really urban versus rural. And I don't know how you slice and dice that, Tyrone. I don't see any way to do that that wouldn't, basically what you'd have to do is each city would become like a city-state, like Venice was to Italy 200 years ago. It was its own nation, essentially. And it just seems very, very messy. So because of that simple reality, I don't think there's any simple solution.
No, it's not a simple solution. I think that we just have to, as Democratic, uphold the laws in the Constitution. A lot of these laws and constitutions will stop a lot of this stuff that they're doing, but we don't uphold them.
Yep, great place to start. Tyrone, thank you very much for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Birmingham, Atlanta, New Orleans. I mean, you could go through the entire South. Memphis. They're all Democratic. Welcome back. Okay, let's pick up your phone calls here. Let's see who. Oh, Mark Taylor Canfield in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. May 3rd was World Press Freedom Day as designated by the United Nations.
Indeed.
So as executive director for Democracy Watch News, I participated in an international conference sponsored by UNESCO where we heard from all sorts of media executives and government officials and NGOs about threats to press freedom around the world, which is a threat to democracy whenever there's a threat to journalism.
Press freedom is the cornerstone of democracy. It's the foundation of democracy.
Absolutely. And it turns out that besides an increasing number of authoritarian states cracking down on journalism, hacking has also become a major problem. So digital media is an issue. But 7 reporters have been killed in Ukraine. 27 reporters and media workers have been killed globally. And worldwide, there are 479 media workers and journalists currently in prison. Also, reporters reporters.
These numbers are all so far this year, you mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Reporters Without Borders just released their World Press Freedom Index rankings for 2022, and the United States is ranked 42nd in the world in terms of press freedom, behind countries like Burkina Faso in Africa, Costa Rica, which is ranked at number 8 and has a very good tradition of protecting freedom of the press. China is ranked 175 out of 180. Russia is ranked 155th. But our ranking in the 40s is due to the fact, and this is RWB, a direct quote from the report, many popular outlets in the United States are owned by a small handful of wealthy individuals. In a diverse global media landscape, local news has declined significantly in recent years. The disinformation affecting American society has created an atmosphere where citizens no longer know who to trust. Online harassment, particularly towards women and minorities, is also a serious issue. Yeah. By the way, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden are at the top 3, as usual. But we have a lot of work to do here in this country, Tom. And as executive director for a nonprofit, I can tell you that one of the hopes, one of the best hopes we have to change the media landscape are these new nonprofit news organizations that are popping up. If they can get the grant funding and public support they deserve. One great example is Documented, which is a great group in New York of people covering news that affects immigrants, so Immigration News Service. Some of the new nonprofits are focusing on news that affect indigenous people and other underrepresented populations. So there are some good signs on the horizon, good things coming. It's just a matter of whether we can set up funding sources for these kinds of nonprofits, since the profit system owned by corporate interests has become very, biased and limited, and it's a very narrow perspective.
The other big issue, Mark, that doesn't get anything close to the ink that it should is the role of private equity in all this.
Oh, yes.
I mean, when Mitt Romney's private equity company bought up Clear Channel, for example, it was the beginning of the end. And, and you've just seen it over and over and over again, radio and television stations, newspapers being acquired by these private equity organizations that then just drain all the blood out of them and leave them as empty shells.
Also, I've talked to billionaires like Tom Sayers about this. The progressives really need to fund their own media because the right wing is great at it. They're really good. They can swing elections that way. And you're right. Clear Channel bought up 880 radio stations across the country at one point. I think now they own about 1,200. So talk about media monopolies. There you go.
Yeah. Although it's not Clear Channel any longer because they got bankrupted because of Mitt Romney's venture capital company or private equity company. Mark Taylor Canfield, thank you, Mark. Always great talking with you.
Tom.
It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Back in 1981, the first year of the Reagan presidency, one of our 2 senators from Oregon here, Mark Hatfield, wrote an op-ed for the Oregon Territory newspaper about the new right, about this whole movement that had seized the Republican Party. And in it, he called them out for escalating nuclear arms, for opposing the Equal Rights Amendment, for opposing abortion, for supporting school prayer, and for their argument that if you weren't on their side, you were not patriotic. He also goes into a long rant about how they're exploiting religion for political purposes, and he thinks it's damaging Christianity as well as America. And then finally, he says, finally, persistent threats of racism lie directly below the surface of new right ideology. And then he goes into this whole rant about that. It's really extraordinary how, what Reagan was doing is coming back into vogue. I got a whole video about the whole thing over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Andy in Hoosick Falls, New York. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. When we had a very sympathetic nursing staff and doctor, and they explained everything to us, and then they let us go. We went home, and I remember leaving. Like, is this it? Is there something else we're supposed to do? And what I noticed is that at no time was a birth certificate nor a death certificate issued. And my point here is that how is it possible that a political party could be so ignorant and so arrogant as to propose murder when there's not even a birth certificate or death certificate?
Right.
It's unfathomable, let alone the trauma through something like a miscarriage.
Well, this is why Mike Pence proposed a law in Indiana, and they actually passed it. It just was, my recollection is it was struck down by the courts, that required women, when they have miscarriages, even if it's a week 5 miscarriage at home, to collect the tissue or catch the blood or whatever, and take it to a funeral home and pay a funeral director $5,000 to cremate it or give it a proper funeral. I mean, that.
Yeah, well, under my personal experience, I would have told them all to go where.
Yep.
After what I went through. And how do you determine when a birth certificate is? Is it retroactive to the time of conception? Because I think the IRS might want to know this too. If that's the case, if I was conceiving in November, I'd want to file my taxes for the child tax credit then.
There you go.
This is the insanity that we're dealing with now, and so I'm sharing my experience on the trauma of this, so that other people can rally, and we can put a stop to this nonsense.
Great, Andy. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective and giving us a shout. Stephen in Powder Springs, Georgia. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. A while ago, one of your callers asked about a progressive organization that could be nationwide. Mm-hmm. And I'm a member of, amongst other organizations, Indivisible. Mm-hmm. And that is a nationwide organization, and it's also a local organization in each congressional district. Some congressional districts have 2 of them, but we all work together. And in my state, and especially in my area, in Metro Atlanta, we have we quite few. Well, we deal with the local and federal candidates, mm-hmm. and they give us deep respect. And there is, in my case, I know where is it, a 503(4), whatever.
501c3, 501c4. Yeah.
Yes. That's what the kind of organizations they are.
Yeah.
So they have money behind them.
Yeah,
and the
right.
candidates and our candidates, and they are progressive.
Yep.
Candidates.
No, Indivisible is a great organization. I mean, they've kind of eclipsed Move On as probably the nation's premier progressive organization that is out there getting things done and mobilizing people. Spot on.
That's correct. I was just saying that your caller was saying that he couldn't find anything. I said, well, look for your Indivisible.
No, I think he wanted to start something. I don't think it was that he couldn't find it.
I was like, well, we started this in, I joined it at the month, January of 17.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. We all got together, and one of the first things we did was go march in the Women's March.
Yeah, Indivisible, as I recall, was started by a few people who'd worked on the Obama campaigns. I could be wrong on that, but
then they sent out people, and the person who started in my state, I'm not sure what he was, but there's a lot of people who are involved in getting out there and progressive.
Yeah.
The problem isn't, as I see it, isn't getting the attention of the Democrats, because Indivisible has their attention foursquare. I know I've seen so many candidates, so many Democrats who are in office come to our meetings and very respectfully ask and talk to us because we have the money.
Right.
And that's what we, the problem I see is that we don't have enough voice out there.
Well, and that's a matter of critical mass. It's of getting people to volunteer. And Indivisible.org, by the way, is the website for Indivisible. And Stephen, I'm a big fan of them. They come on our program from time to time to give us updates. They're great. Daily Kos also has quite an activity over there, dailykos.com.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Our book today is Can We All Be Feminists? It's a collection of essays edited by Jane Eric Udori. This first chapter, or first essay, is from Charlotte Shane. It's called No Wave Feminism. If you feel like feminism is failing you, you're not alone. I sometimes, and now again, as someone moving even further into the far left, who cannot abide the forms of feminism that embrace and are complicit with the worst aspects of liberalism. The more I learn about the intersecting oppressive forces that continue to shape the Western world, colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, xenophobia, and racism, and the network of cruel social machinery to which these systems give rise, incarceration, crippling debt, disenfranchisement, deportation, and so on, the less sense it makes to use gender as the primary lens through which to regard human-engineered suffering. Feminism doesn't feel like the sharpest weapon to wield against white supremacy or border policing, for instance, or even the best tool with which to approach basic civic concerns like vibrant schools. That's not because those issues don't impact women. Obviously, they directly and indirectly impact many, but they don't necessarily impact women more or in dramatically different ways than they do men. In other words, the most significant challenges these issues present aren't tethered to one's sex, and so prioritizing gender above other aspects of identity limits one's realm of ethical responses. Here's an example. American prisons often keep female prisoners shackled while they give birth. There are variations on the theme. Some women are shackled during labor, some are unshackled, but then shackled again almost immediately afterward, and almost all are shackled while heavily pregnant. There's some variation of what shackling entails, too. It can mean being cuffed at the wrists or at the ankles, or both, or cuffed to a hospital bed or chained at the waist. Articulating these details makes the sadism even starker. A class-action federal lawsuit in 2017 alleged more than 40 women at the Milwaukee County Jail suffered this horror. It was preceded by lawsuits in 2014 and 2016 against that same jail for similar practice. But the appalling practice is hardly confined to one city or one state. In 2015, New York prisons were found to be shackling prisoners in labor in spite of a state law that made it illegal to do so. And according to a 2016 report by the Prison Birth Project and Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, jails and prisons in Massachusetts were guilty of similar violations. Most feminists probably agree that this is a feminist issue. The topic accordingly receives coverage on feminist websites and sometimes in women's magazines. But does a feminist obligation to attend to the rights of the imprisoned extend only as far as pregnancy and labor? Or is it a feminist issue when a non-pregnant woman is shackled? Or when she is caged for years and exploited for her labor, denied face-to-face visits from loved ones, held captive in a compound in the name of, quote, justice? If the answer to these questions is yes, then it is also a feminist issue then is it also a feminist issue when men are shackled during various health emergencies, seizures, say? In 2014, a male inmate in Colorado died after undergoing several seizures while in restraints and receiving no medical treatment. Is it a feminist issue when incarcerated men are denied the right to visit with family or exploited for their labor? Is it a feminist issue when so many men are raped while in prison? Or does feminism's responsibility begin and end with gender-based mistreatment? The feminists hired by prominent media outlets often advocate for measures that would result in higher levels of incarceration. They write op-eds in favor of further criminalization around sex work and call for longer prison sentences for men convicted of assault, which we've known for decades is not necessarily synonymous with men who committed the crime. They also disturbingly relish the theater of sentencing, like that enacted by Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who told serial sexual abuser Larry Nassar that if she could, she would allow some or many people to do to him what he did to others. So sexual violation is an atrocity unless it happens to the right person. They capitalize on women's justified fear and anger around mistreatment by men to shore up the status quo, to suggest that our current problems are not the result of fundamentally unjust institutions, but rather institutions that are only incidentally sexist. That means that those same institutions could become less so with the right adjustments, like more draconian sentencing for crimes against women, or more female judges. But the prison system is racist and brutal by design, not by accident or mismanagement, just as the court system regularly fails the most vulnerable because it was built to protect the powerful. The challenge of the 21st century is not to demand equal opportunity to participate in the machinery of oppression, revolutionary thinker Angela Davis has written. Rather, it is to identify and dismantle those structures. Yet leveraging our existing legal system for criminalization remains the go-to strategy for most feminists when it comes to dealing with objectionable behavior. The book, Can We All Be Feminists?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. The title of my piece today over at HartmannReport.com is Democracy in the Workplace Having a Moment? And a democracy in the workplace, of course, is a union. You will recall yesterday or the day before we had I think it was yesterday, wasn't it? We had a couple of people from Starbucks, the Starbucks union. Oh, it was the day before. Thank you. On the program talking about, what they're doing and all this kind of stuff and how cool it is that people will come in and, when they say, what's your name? People will say, my name is Union Strong. And so it gets, plugged into the system. And so when your coffee comes up, they yell, Union Strong. And, well, Starbucks has sent out a memo to all their stores saying, don't do that anymore. Don't say union out loud. Right. They're apparently not happy with this. And in fact, the tweet of the memo is attached to my article today at HartmannReport.com. Here's a company whose founder is worth over $3 billion. Most likely, the vast majority of that money came from Starbucks, which means that it could have gone to his employees instead, but it went to Howard Schultz. He's not unique in this regard, and now the employees, whether it's Starbucks or Apple or Amazon, they're saying, hey, wait a minute, we should have a right to unionize and we should have a piece of this pie. And, this is a pretty simple principle. Democracy is a good thing. Democracy at the level of government is a good thing because it produces a more egalitarian world. It tends to lessen inequality. It lifts people's control over their own life situations. It protects communities from predation by the rich and powerful. It meets the needs of individuals and families. That's democracy in general. It provides for a stable, healthy, happy society. Democracy in the workplace does much the same. Democracy in the workplace is what you call a union. A union is a democratic institution, just like a government is a democratic institution. A union is a government. It's a nonprofit governmental or democratic institution, small d, democratic institution. in the workplace, and people with a union are more likely to have high levels of job satisfaction, demonstrate better job performance, be more productive, earn higher wages and benefits, make the company more money, experience fewer sick days, offer suggestions to help improve the company and its products. They're more likely to stay with their employer longer, lower turnover. They're more likely to champion the employer's reputation in the community. And they're more likely to respect their fellow workers, particularly in highly diverse workplaces, when there is a union. These are all good reasons to have unions. And so why don't we have unions? Well, I think the answer is very simple. One word: greed. Bernie Sanders recently tweeted, if Jeff Bezos can afford a $500 million yacht, a $177 million Beverly Hills estate, a $78 million Maui estate, a $23 million D.C. mansion with 25 bathrooms, and a rocket ship, you know what? He can afford to recognize the American Labor Union and negotiate the Amazon Labor Union and negotiate a first fair contract, or a fair first contract. This goes back to the 30s, when unions were legalized, and it was a big deal. And I tell the story, and I've told this before, so my apologies to those of you who have been longtime listeners, but I think it's probably been a year or two since I've talked about it. One of my earliest memories is from when I was around 4 or 5 years old, and we lived in this little house on Cleveland Street in Lansing, Michigan. And the house, I think, was a converted garage. I mean, it was that small. It was a one-bedroom house. And it was my mom, my dad, myself, and my younger brother, Steve. And Mom was pregnant with our third, my brother, Stan, who was my brother who just passed away earlier this year, or last year. And John, the youngest, was yet to come. And, we were living in this little one-bedroom house. And every weekend, my mom would say, let's go to Sally's, which was her name for Salvation Army. We'd go to the Salvation Army stores, and we got clothes, we got furniture, we'd get plates and stuff. Mostly, for Mom and Dad, it was looking for books, because they were big-time book collectors. And, when your books are only 5 cents each, you can get a lot of books. My dad was making a living. He had 2 jobs. He was a door-to-door salesman. This was 1957 or 1956. And he was going door to door selling Rexair vacuum cleaners and World Book encyclopedias, which was kind of cool for me because I had a set of World Book encyclopedias, and I set out when I was 7 or 8 years old to read the whole thing from beginning to end, which I never accomplished. I'll tell you right up front, but I loved those encyclopedias. We didn't even have a television. And then Dad, and we used to go to the cheese store, what I called the cheese store, which was the surplus food distribution center in Lansing, where, every week we could get 20 pounds of white macaroni and 10 pounds of dried non-fat milk and powdered milk and a brick of American cheese. And I still hate powdered milk, and I still have a love-hate relationship with mac and cheese. But then in 1957, my dad got a union job at a local tool and die shop, Lansing Tool and Die. And within a year, we had bought a brand new 3-bedroom house with a basement out in the suburbs of South Lansing. It's where my brothers Stan and John were born. Dad had got a brand new car that didn't have holes in the floorboard. Every year, we took a vacation driving all around the country. We bought our first TV that year in 1957. Along with a living room full of furniture, sit in and watch it. In other words, what happened was when my dad got a union job, when I was 5 years old, my family went from living in poverty to being in the middle class. And our experience was not unique in that regard. This was happening all over America, to the point that 2/3 of Americans were living in the middle class by 1980 when Ronald Reagan came into office. Today, it's about 44%. We have lost about 20% of the middle class to Reaganism, to 40 years of Reaganism. And the main way that Reagan has destroyed the American middle class, well, there were 2 big things. One was destroying the unions. Reagan was the first president in the history of the United States to put an anti-labor lawyer in charge of the Labor Department, Ray Donovan. And, they began dismantling unions. It was one of the first things Reagan did as president, was go after PATCO, one of only 2 unions that had endorsed him. That didn't matter. He was a Republican. Loyalty isn't a thing for Republicans. And so he took down the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Association. He was the first president since 1921 to drop the top tax rate on the morbidly rich from at that time it was 74%. He dropped it all the way down to 25% for 1 year and then up to 28%. Today, the morbidly rich on average pay less than 3%. And as a result of this, now here we are 41 years later, after Reagan, 18,000 families, the top 1/100th of 1% of Americans, own more wealth than the entire middle class. And 3 men today hold more wealth than the bottom half of all Americans. Let that sink in for a moment. How did that happen? Well, our democracy has been gutted, and in large part by the Supreme Court going after union rights. And because the Supreme Court has done as much to destroy unions as have, you go to thomhartmann.com/labor.pdf, you'll see the article about it, or the chapter from my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court, on this very topic. So what do? Well, frankly, I think we need unions again. We really need unions again. And so I will continue to highlight the people at Starbucks and Amazon. Joe Biden met in the White House either yesterday or the day before with organizers from Starbucks and from Amazon. This is cool stuff. To have a Democrat in the White House, isn't that great? Bring back the American middle class. We're working on it. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. I got a quick story to tell you on the other side of this break, and then I'll pick up your phone call. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Speaking the truth, the multinational corporations and the union busters would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back. And welcome back, DC in Eva Beach, Hawaii. Hey, DC, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. What's up?
I wanted to ask you a question. I was wondering about the 3 judges that Trump appointed.
All right.
All 3 of them committed perjury at the hearings for their judgeship, or whatever you would call that.
Yeah, at their confirmation hearings.
I'm thinking, shouldn't they resign or be forced out of the court by law? Because they're Supreme Court judges and they committed perjury.
Well, if they had any common decency, DC, they would, but they don't. I mean, it's just, they're Republicans.
I know, but can't somebody else, can't Biden, can't senators or congressmen do anything about that?
No, not really. It would require the only way that you can hold a Supreme Court justice accountable. I suppose you could try to prosecute them for perjury, but that would require the Justice Department, and Merrick Garland's not going to do that. Joe Biden's not going to do that. They're not going to go after another branch of government. So the only way that you can hold them responsible really is by impeachment. And an impeachment would have to start in the House of Representatives. There's not the stomach for that there. And then it would have to get 2/3 of the votes in the Senate, which is definitely not going to happen. So, it's just everybody considers it a futile effort. I think, though, that the larger issue, DC, is that what this has done is revealed how craven these people are on the Supreme Court and how lacking in ethics and morality they are. And I think it's doing some serious damage to the reputation of the court. DC, thanks for the call. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, thanks for watching us on Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Happy birthday to you and Sean.
Thank you.
And I loved your story. You're brilliant all the time.
Thank you.
And one reason I called, no wonder these Republicans want history and books destroyed, because the Republicans have always been cruel, vicious, hateful in their past. not only did the Republicans attempt in 1933 the insurrection against Roosevelt, the Republicans were terrorists in the 60s, too. Republicans had a group called the Mink Coat Mob. On November 4th, 1960, Vice President candidate LBJ and his wife went to Dallas days before the election. When they got there at their hotel, they were mobbed by 100 angry, violent white Republican women wearing red hats. And
mink coats, presumably.
Yes, they were. And LBJ and his wife were physically pushed by them. The women grabbed Lady Bird's gloves and took them away from her, and they all took out their hat pins and stabbed them with it.
You're kidding.
No, I saw this on I watch the History Channel, and I saw it, and they were wearing their little mink coats, too.
I had no idea.
They're so disgusting. They've only gotten worse. These Republicans have just only gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, that's, the authoritarian mindset predisposes you to violence, so it shouldn't surprise us. I never heard of the mink coat mob, though. Thanks a lot for that, Jessica. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. The recent killing of a young black man in Michigan, Patrick Loyola, who was, the police officer was sitting on his back and put a gun right to the back of his head and shot him, is just the latest example of police killing people out of traffic stops, and predominantly black people. 28% of the people who are killed in traffic stops are black, but African Americans are only 13% of our population. Police in the United States have killed nearly 600 people during traffic stops since 2017. Mapping Police Violence is the nonprofit that's been doing the work on this. About 10% just this year, about 10% of the 1,100 people killed by police this year have been killed at traffic stops. Dante Wright, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, we know their names and we know their stories, but we're not doing enough to get this under control. Other countries tend not to have this problem. We need to do something now. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. A couple of other things I just wanted to flag for you. Back in June 26th, 2014. So step into the Wayback Machine for a moment. This is 6 years ago. If I'm doing it's 8 years ago. 8 years ago, June 26, 2014, many abortion clinics had barriers around them. They were putting up cement and wire fences and things to keep the protesters off their lawns. And the Supreme Court on June 26, 2014 ruled that they couldn't do this anymore. In fact, they said that the reason that they could no longer block protesters from their streets and yards and things was because of the First Amendment. The advocates, this is from a Politico article from June 26, 2014. Quote, the court said the state law violated the First Amendment because its buffer zone limited speech too broadly, covering 35 feet from the doorway of facilities and including public areas like sidewalks. Although other buffer zones typically are smaller, specifying distances such as 8 to 15 feet, the advocate said the court's decision puts them in jeopardy. Abortion opponents hailed the ruling as a victory in protecting free speech. Yes, you may not put up a fence around an abortion clinic. Here, the Commonwealth has pursued public safety interests by the extreme step of closing a substantial portion of a traditional public forum for all speakers, John Roberts wrote for the court. In other words, he's talking about the Massachusetts law that allowed abortion clinics to put up a fence around themselves. And he says this law is an extreme step and has closed down a substantial portion of a traditional public forum for all speakers. That traditional public forum was the yard and sidewalk in front of the abortion clinics. He said allowing abortion clinics to block demonstrations in front of them is, quote, burdens substantially more speech than necessary to achieve the Commonwealth's asserted interests. The court's four conservatives said the law was unfairly aimed at anti-abortion speech because it restricted protesters but not clinic employees. So in other words, you can't put a fence around an abortion clinic that stops protesters, but the employees can go through. That doesn't make any sense. They go on to say the case was brought by abortion opponents who regularly try to do sidewalk counseling outside a Boston clinic. They argued that the barriers that were allowed by the Massachusetts law restricted their speech against abortion. So for abortion clinics, the Supreme Court, the conservatives on the Supreme Court back 8 years ago said, you may not put up a fence. Well, guess what the Supreme Court just did yesterday? This from ABC News, Alexandra Hutzler. An imposing, unscalable 8-foot-high fence has been erected at the U.S. Supreme Court in the wake of protests over a bombshell draft opinion on abortion. The protests outside the court's marble front steps have been largely peaceful, prompting some to question why a new security barrier is necessary. By the way, the Supreme Court is empty right now. The justices are not scheduled to meet there again in person until May 12th. But hey, these guys say if you're an abortion clinic, you may not put up a fence. We, the Supreme Court, have ruled. But we, the Supreme Court, when we say something that people don't like, we really don't want protesters in our front yard. Amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Meanwhile, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, told a right-wing talk show host, Joe Pagliarulo, I don't know how he says his name, Wednesday. I mentioned this briefly, but I think this really should be highlighted. You're going to see, in fact, I'm predicting over the next month or so, you are, in fact, all the way up until November, up till the election, you're going to see a few Republicans like Joni Ernst and Ted Cruz who are out there like, yeah, make abortion illegal, put women in jail. But the vast majority of them are going to be running in the other direction because they know how to read a poll as well as anybody else. And in fact, once the primary season is over, because these are Republicans talking to their primary voters saying, yeah, put these women to death. Primary voters are down with that. But in the general election, they got to find something else to talk about. And Greg Abbott down in Texas, the governor of Texas, says, I know what I'm going to talk about. We're going to go back to a 1982 Supreme Court ruling that said that Texas has to educate all children in Texas because the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says all persons have equal protection under the law. Doesn't say all citizens. So Texas has to educate kids who are in the state who aren't even citizens. And of course, that's true of the entire Constitution. The Constitution does not provide free speech or any of the other constitutional protections just for citizens. It's for persons. Everybody in the United States, whether a citizen or not, is protected by our Constitution. And the Supreme Court said that in 1982. But Greg Abbott thinks that this will get him some good press. He's going to go after the immigrant children. You know, it's like going after trans kids, right? They're not going to fight back. Immigrant kids are not going to fight back. They can't. So, of course, the bullies on the right want to go after them.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You know, sometimes you think, how low will these guys get? They would never go that low, right? Pick on children? Of course they will.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Climate Chaos, Lessons on Survival from Our Ancestors by Brian Fagan and Nadia Durrani.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists Suckered Millions Out of Their Homes and Demolished the American Dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from Chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist's killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwarzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwarzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwarzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwartzman's 60th. There were some differences, though. She wrote, "Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon." Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there. The book is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz. Welcome back. Pick up your calls in just a second. I just wanted to share a geeky science with you. This is absolutely fascinating. I got this from Nature Briefing, Nature magazine, the very prestigious science magazine. I subscribe to it. And I just got this in the mail this morning. Meat-Free Monday, which is a thing. There's this Meat-Free Monday. I remember when it was Meat-Free Friday. When I was in school, it was always fish on Fridays, right? I think that was the Catholic influence, which was a good thing back then. And but the Meat-Free Monday is going viral all around the world. And they did the math on this, and they found that if just 1/5 of global beef consumption was replaced with a meat substitute, whether it's Beyond Burger or just more vegetables, if 1/5 of global beef consumption was done away with, and they estimate it would take 30 years to really do it, but it would cut in half the amount of deforestation that's going on around the world. If we replaced 80% of our beef with beef alternatives, it would eliminate 90% of worldwide forest loss. Beef is really and truly just the deadliest thing out there. I mean, in addition to causing heart attacks and strokes, it's poisoning the environment. All righty, let's pick up your phone calls on Anything Goes Friday. Here, Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Keno, what's on your mind today?
Yes, praise be for that other force, the mother force. Mother Day is coming up.
There you go.
Good news, Tom, for you. I'm in the Green Party now. I'm going to form a coalition with the Democrats. I ask all Green Party members to get behind Democratic candidates, and the theme will be, in France, they're talking about le grand déclassement. This is where they feel that citizens are worried that they cannot attain the standard of living of previous generations. And the reason for that is the stranglehold of the corporations.
Yep.
And so the Green
And
Party
Macron is one of their guys. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is the theme now. The Green Party members should work with the Democrats. Here in Florida, we want Val Demings is for senator. Green Party members, it's a call to work for her and across the nation to work for the Democrats now. And the theme will be le grand déclassement. And we got to discuss, what is the word in English for that, Tom?
The great middle class, isn't it?
Well, the decline of the great middle class.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't speak any French at all. So I'm useless in that regard. If it was German or Hebrew or Russian or Japanese, I could speak a little bit of all those languages, but no French.
Well, I speak Spanish fluently. I'm married to a woman from Nicaragua.
Cool.
I used to work for Planned Parenthood. And I was a president, and I was an environmental advisor to the Florida Transportation. So
wow, you've been an activist for a long, long time, haven't you? Good on you.
I'm working for the Green Party now, and I'm calling a recruitment for Green Party members join with Democrats across the nation, because now the Holy Spirit, a spirit of goodness, is speaking through your program today. D.C. from Hawaii talked about those 3 perjured justices. Nobody had. All we have to do is start talking about. There are 3 perjured justices. There's that one that's wife has broken. He's broken the rules. He's a lawbreaker. There's the other one that Lawrence O'Donnell pointed out believes in a man cites a man that believes in witchcraft in his thing. So here we got these 5 people on the Supreme Court that the Democrats got to talk about. The corporations put in power, and they grind, they classimat. They're strangling us. They're getting all the money and not giving enough money to working class people. So the French, it was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal on the 23rd of April, malaise grips the French elections. Because in France, they're talking about this les grands déclassements. They know they can't get a standard of living that their parents and grandparents had because the corporations are so greedy. So, Tom, do you agree that we need to find the English equivalent word and make that to be a theme for the Green Party Democratic Coalition in the elections this year?
I do, and again, I don't know what that French means, but forging coalitions across, Greens and Democrats and progressives and the Democratic Socialists of America, and I mean just the whole bunch. I mean, getting everybody together. And in fact, I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this at the top of the third hour, the next hour here, because I did want to get into exactly what. How the French are really pissed off at Macron. And I'll explain all that in about a half hour. But Keno, you're onto something here. And I'm so glad to hear, my friend, that you are moving forward. I remember when you were a Moosehooter Republican. I'm so glad that you've joined the cause. Nina in McAlpin, Florida. Hey, Nina, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It's such an honor to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
I know this, after listening to all of your subjects today, mine sounds kind of boring, but I like Tim Ryan, and I'm hoping that Tim Ryan will beat J.D. Vance, which I'm sure he will, and then after 2 years of Senate, he can run for president, because I really liked him being president the last time, and I'm hoping he doesn't have any baggage that I don't know of or anything, but he's young, he seems kind of progressive middle, and I think in the general election he would do really good. What do you think?
I agree with you. Tim Ryan is a pretty good guy. I was introduced to him by Marianne Williamson. He and I were both speaking at one of her sister something or other conferences out in Los Angeles back, 6 years ago or thereabouts. And Tim, like me, is a meditator. He's been meditating for years and years. And so we kind of bonded around that, had dinner together. And, I realize he's not, anywhere near as far left as I am. He's not a total progressive, but I, for Ohio, for right now, for what they're trying to do, and he would probably be to the right of Sherrod Brown. But, having 2 Democratic senators from Ohio, I think would be a marvelous thing. And I personally have great affection for Tim Ryan. So I'll leave it at that, Nina, but I think you got a good one there.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Great talking with you. Catherine in Atascadero, California. Hey, Catherine, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to mention Amy Klobuchar's name and also Pete Buttigieg. However, the reason I called was about this abortion again. What is to prevent these crazy bullies from going backwards in time to these clinics and getting their records and charging those women and those doctors and that personnel, charging them with the crimes they want to charge women for having an abortion? They could do that, they could do anything they want.
Well, they can't actually do that, Catherine. I think the phrase is ex post facto. I believe it's in the Constitution.
Okay, I've heard that before.
Yeah, and Congress shall pass no ex post facto laws. In other words, you can't retroactively criminalize something. So something is legal up until the point at which you make it illegal, and then once you make it illegal, it's only illegal going forward beyond that. So. But the larger issue I think that you raise is that when these guys get on their high horses and they're convinced that they are carrying out a moral crusade and all this kind of stuff, Any abortion clinic who has any of their electronic records that are in any way reachable via the internet should double down on their security on that, because I think we're going to see something resembling open warfare breaking out here, or at least verbal open warfare as this debate heats up and as we get closer and closer to the election. Catherine, thank you for the call. John in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, I got your Coming to America answer. They have the Big Mac and we've got the Big Mick.
Oh.
Hey, they're MAGA. Let's be MALA. Make America lead again. They have America first.
Yeah, except the MALA is, the root word. It means bad, doesn't it, in Latin? Or the malo, also in Spanish?
Well, I don't know. But,
keep thinking, John.
I've got some more here. Every time they scream freedom, the libs need to own the word liberty.
That's a nice one. Yeah.
Liberty from hospital bills, liberty from corporate masters.
Sure.
And if you want to, and we already have a great way to get commercials done. All we need to do is get the rights to undercover boss to show what liberation looks like. Because at the end of every show, the boss pays off medical bills, or he pays off their student loans.
I've never seen the show, John.
Oh, you ought to check it out, because that happens at the end of every episode.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like a show that's essentially deifying bosses. Oh, yes, we're going to, with our neoliberal policies, we're going to put the rich people in charge of America, but they're so nice.
Well, in a way, but I'm just thinking, it's just,
No, I get it. Keep thinking, John. You got some great ideas there, and I have a feeling there's more where those came from. So it's great to hear from you, and thank you very much. We'll be back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Looks like the sun might be cracking out here in Portland. Whoa, it was supposed to thunderstorm all day. Weird weather. I don't think it's cracked 60 degrees more than 2 or 3 times so far this spring. We'll be right back with more of your calls after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's talk media for the rest of us. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Scott in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Scott, thanks for listening to us on X-Ray FM. What's on your mind today?
Oh, you bet, Tom. Hey, and happy birthday to everybody. Today's my birthday as well. So,
hey, happy birthday, Scott.
Sean, I don't know.
Another Taurus.
Thanks. Yeah. And so, Sean, I don't know if you know that today we share our birthday with the explosion of the Hindenburg. So there is
Sean knows that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I imagine he does. Hey, I just wanted to tout our voting process here in Oregon again.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, middle of the week, I got a ping on my phone, said, "Oh, we're sending your ballot. It's going to be in the mail. Look for it, and if it doesn't show up, call us." And the next day, I got it, and going through it. And I don't think we should call it vote by mail, because I've never actually mailed mine. I've always dropped them off. But I think it should be like vote at home, or vote at your kitchen table, or vote in a bubble bath with a glass of wine, or something like that. Because it's,
I love it.
It's just the better process. But anyway, what caught my eye was in the voters pamphlet. There's the sort of the explanations, the little submission statements from each of the parties.
Mm-hmm.
And the Democratic Party had 15 bullet points. The Republicans had 14. But the Democrats, they're all like an average of 4 words. It's like quality public schools, protection for unions, humane immigration reform. And the Republican stuff is all these just long grievances. I'll just read 2 real quickly. One is the principle that parents are the ones to decide what is proper for their children to be taught in our public school system. And the government should never replace mothers and fathers as the parent. And the separation of church and state. The government must never again be allowed to force itself on institutions of faith like what was seen during the COVID era. The government with no restrictions is an entity that will oppress and persecute any individual or group that stands in its way. It is the duty of God-fearing people to stand against said government.
This sounds like the weird crap that we used to write in high school. I published an underground newspaper in high school, and it was about that bad. Wasn't the same topics. But,
yeah. But it's just, as you read through them, it's just there's just nothing but there's just grievance just thrown up on the page, and there's no like, this is really what we're about. We're just like, we don't like this, we don't like that. They even mention social media corporations censoring people, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
So, well, if we could, if the country could get on vote by mail, I think we'd be better off. Oh, and my favorite is I drop it off there's a drop box that's at a drive-through at a McDonald's. Here in Portland, at the Hollywood district. You should check it out. It's right there. So come on, America, how easy can it be for you? Go get a Happy Meal and drop your ballot off.
Yeah, there you go. And that's pretty smart, putting one at McDonald's. I mean,
Yeah. Why not? We're already there. So
yeah, I don't do that much driving around. I hadn't noticed any, but there's a bunch of them around Portland. Is that or around Oregon?
It's the only one I know of in a drive-through. But there's like every library has a drop box. Right. But there's the big ones, the big steel boxes that are bolted to the ground. That there's probably a dozen of those around, maybe even more.
Yeah. I just dropped mine in the mail.
It's just too easy. It's just too easy, and it's just the fact you've mentioned that before, where you can sit at home and go over the information and make your decisions at your own time and pace.
And this is why every year we're in the top 2 or 3 states in terms of voter turnout.
That's exactly right.
Because it's so easy.
Come on, America.
It's fun, in fact. Scott, thank you.
It is.
Thank you for that.
Happy birthday to you, Tom.
Thank you. Back at you. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Have you noticed that people are basically imitating Donald Trump all over the country? We're seeing all this rude behavior, sexist, racist behavior. People getting arrested at airport gates, airplanes being turned around because people are fighting with flight attendants, disorderly, rude, unhinged conduct. I mean, it's just gone nuts. Car crashes are up, gun deaths are up, shootings are up. Healthcare workers are being literally physically assaulted in some hospitals. They're having to put together panic buttons. This kind of behavior in our schools is increasing. It looks like, according to some sociologists, psychologists, and even business consultants, it looks like a lot of this ties back not just to the Trump presidency, with Donald Trump providing us with an example of how to be, an obnoxious person, but also the crisis of the pandemic. We've got a deeper dive into this topic over at thomhartmann.com. There's a great video about it. You can check it out there. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Jan in Kirkland, Washington. Hey, Jan, what's on your mind today?
Okay, well, I'm in one of the states that is saying we'll be a haven, we'll allow abortions, we're going to beef up our ability to help the people coming over from Idaho, et cetera. Well, the Republicans are saying we're going to ban abortion. But the problem that occurred to me is that I remember reading probably at the beginning of COVID, how many of our hospitals in the state of Washington have merged with Catholic institutions. And I'm wondering if that, in effect, it won't matter if we're a haven state, and if both the laws for abortion and the law allowing death with dignity are going to be moot.
Yeah.
Because there will be no one who can, even if they're not Catholic, if they're working for an organization affiliated with the Catholic organization, who can actually work with you on it.
Yeah, death with dignity is legal in Washington state. If you can get 2 doctors to sign off that you're going to be dead within 6 months and you're in terrible pain, you can take your own life.
Right.
With phenobarbital, and you just drink a little bottle of this stuff and fall asleep.
Or you don't, but at least it's your choice.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the whole point. It's your choice.
Right, and abortion...
They have no right to impose their religious beliefs on me.
Correct, and abortion is legal in Washington State as well,
right,
and will continue to be.
Maybe not. The Republicans are saying they'll take over the legislature and pass legislation outlawing it.
Oh, my. I'm very ambivalent about any religion taking over hospitals and then saying, we are going to impose our religion on you, even if you are not a member of our religion. I think that's wrong. I think it should be illegal.
Against freedom of religion, which is a constitutional right.
Yeah, absolutely, because the freedom from religion implies a freedom from religion as well. I'm with you. Jan, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's a tough issue. Corinna, and I mean, it's a great thing that the Catholic Church is taking some small fraction of the hundreds of billions of dollars that they have and running hospitals with it. But hey, Corinna in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you're on the air. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm abortions.
Yeah.
Adults. We're talking about adults, 25 to 49, 52%. The teenager pregnancy is about 13 to 17%. Mm-hmm. And that is not said anything. And I'm sorry, for me, it shows that those people who deciding not to have children do that more for economical reasons than for any other thing.
Right.
It's a wonder to me that, knowing all these numbers, a government body would not go and say, hey, how about we're going to give a free insurance to kids until 25 years old?
Right.
How about we can offer free daycare so people can have children? How about we're going to cut off and have a loan, student loan for those females who are being through school and afraid to lose their job and a career because they're single and they're forced to have children? How about at least change the fact that America, for the past 3 years, 2019 to 2021, is on 33rd or 36th place on newborn death. So you're forcing me to deliver a child who's not having a guarantee even of a third world to survive in the hospital, which was going to kick me out after I spent about $15,000 for a vaginal delivery, not a C-section, spent for these Catholic hospitals or whatever it is, and they're not even a guarantee that there is going to be some higher level of insurance that my newborn child will not going to die right there.
I'm with you, Corinna.
And I mean, this boggles my mind.
Mine too. I'm sorry, we just have 10 seconds here. If I could just real quickly say, if we had comprehensive sex education in our schools and if we had a strong middle class with a strong social safety net like other countries do, we would have a much lower abortion rate. And there's a lot of evidence for that.
Exactly. Instead of treating females like mares and the slaves.
Yeah, exactly. Brood mares, or cattle. Corinna, thank you. Thank you. Very, 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 very well said. We will be back. I want to get into the French left forming a coalition to take on Emmanuel Macron. I'll tell you about that on the other side. And also, Donald Trump suggested to his Secretary of Defense that we throw a missile at Mexico.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects, too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Luddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Luddite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home? A temple to the new India or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a ghost story by Arundhati Roy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back to the third hour of our program, Once Unthinkable. That's the headline over at commondreams.org. Once Unthinkable, the French left forms a coalition to challenge Macron in Parliament. Here's what's going on. Most Americans are just like completely unfamiliar with French politics. And France just had an election. And it was Emmanuel Macron in the final round, the playoff game here, was Emmanuel Macron versus Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen, basically an open Nazi, slightly dialed back from that, but damn close, and a pro-Putin Nazi, by the way. And Emmanuel Macron, a former banker who has reduced the corporate tax rate, has cut taxes on rich people, has cut back programs, social welfare spending, and is in the process of trying to raise the retirement age in France from its current 62. Yes, in France, you retire at 62. Trying to raise it up to 65 to be like the United States. And the French people are seriously pissed off about this. He also has engaged in a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric. He's got anti-Muslim policies. Basically trying to suck up to Le Pen's voters. And so now what has happened is a group of political parties, keep in mind, France has a parliamentary system, so, there's just all kinds of political parties. And they are getting together and saying, we are going to vote as a bloc. Now, this has not happened in over 20 years. But it's very straightforward. France's center-left Socialist Party, Jean-Luc Mélenchon's far-left France Unbowed. Now, Mélenchon only was 1 point short of Le Pen. It almost was a runoff between Mélenchon and Macron. And I think, frankly, Mélenchon would have won that. Macron just squeaked by. But, Macron is sort of the the Bill Clinton of French politics, only Bill Clinton's no longer popular in France, kind of thing. I mean, Bill Clinton was a very popular president when he was president. Every president has their moment, right? But that moment, that neoliberal moment when, let's ship jobs overseas, let's cut taxes on rich people, let's cut taxes on corporations, et cetera, that moment has gone. And it's gone in France, too. And Macron is the guy who has put this thing together. My apologies if I'm mangling his name. I don't, as I said earlier, I don't speak French. But they now have 4 parties: the French Socialist Party, the French Communist Party, the Socialist, Jean-Luc Mélenchon's France Unbowed Party, and the Green Party. These 4 French parties have formed a coalition, and they are only going to put up one candidate in each of the 70 different, they call them constituencies, basically what we would call a congressional district, with the people running for parliament. This coalition is going to put up one candidate in each. No more divide and conquer in France. And I think this is absolutely fascinating. This, as the BBC said, they said instead of running against each other in the parliamentary elections, socialists, Greens, communists, and supporters of France Unbowed will share one candidate per constituency, thus greatly increasing their chances. The last time this happened, as I mentioned, was 20 years ago. So, FYI. The other story I wanted to share with you real quickly, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here on Anything Goes Friday, is unbleeping believable is the headline. Bob Brigham writing over at rawstory.com. Experts weigh in on the shocking Trump revelations from Mark Esper. Mark Esper was the last Senate-confirmed Secretary of Defense that Donald Trump had. And he just published a book. And in this book, he just reveals how insane Donald Trump was. That he desperately wanted the American military to shoot Black Lives Matter protesters in the legs. And when they refused to do it, when Mark Esper refused to go along with this, not only did Trump scream at him obscenities, but he also dragged Mike Pence in and screamed obscenities at him. Then he goes to Esper and says, why don't we send missiles down to Mexico and take out the drug traffickers with missiles? It turns out that this was actually the scheme of a movie, the Tom Clancy movie, Clear and Present Danger. It was basically the plot. This was from 1989. And it was actually the novel was 1989. It was adopted into a 1994 movie starring Harrison Ford, where the drug traffickers had just kind of seized control of Mexico. So the American president said, "Oh yeah, we're going to nuke those guys." It's nuts, right? I don't know how to say it beyond that. Retired 3-star General Mark Hertling said, launching Patriot missiles against a ground target and thinking no one will know? Stable genius material. Because, when Trump said, well, why don't we just send some missiles into Mexico? His defense secretary said that's a crime. You can't, that's a declaration of war against Mexico. You can't do that. And Trump said, well, we'll do it in a way that nobody will know. And 3-star General Hertling comes out and goes, yeah, right. Stable genius. And this is the guy that the Republican Party wants to put back in the White House. That's where it just suddenly gets sober. Donald Trump, by the way, to this day, has completely refused to condemn Vladimir Putin for what he's doing in Ukraine. I don't think that fact gets anywhere near enough coverage in our media. Donald Trump refuses to condemn Putin for the rapes in Ukraine, for the murders in Ukraine, for the tortures in Ukraine, people having limbs cut off while they're awake and conscious as a form of torture to try to get information out. Donald Trump will not condemn Vladimir Putin for any of this. He was Putin's agent in the White House. He still is Putin's agent. And the Republicans still want this guy to be president. It's insane. Okay, let's pick up your phone calls here. Jackie in Port Orchard, Washington. Hey, Jackie, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Hi, Tom. We've either met or we're very near 1 million deaths in the United States due to COVID. Yeah.
I do.
So I just believe it should go out on blast that it was either 2017 or 2018 that Trump and his Republican administration is the one that disbanded the National Security Council that focused on pandemics, and he also proposed the CDC cuts.
Yep.
Because he did not perceive the threat of pandemics in the same way that experts in the field did.
Well, just to flesh this out a little, Jackie, after the Ebola thing, where Republicans were talking about impeaching Obama because he let a doctor who'd been exposed to Ebola, or had Ebola, I guess, come back to the United States, and a nurse who'd been exposed. Remember all that scandal and Chris Christie and all that stuff. After that, the Obama administration put together a couple of things. Number one, they created an office of, I forget the name of it, but basically an office of pandemics within the Department of Homeland Security. Then they did the same thing within the National Security Council, which operates out of the White House. So there were two different agencies that were created to deal with pandemics. And then they published what they literally called the Pandemic Handbook about how the federal government should respond in the event there was a pandemic. When Trump came into office, he got rid of the handbook, the Pandemic Handbook, literally just, had copies shredded, get rid of that, get it out of here, and he closed down both those offices. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were utterly unprepared, which is, I'm guessing to your point, why we have 1 million dead people in the United States. We have the highest rate of death in the entire developed world, and the second or third highest rate of death on the entire planet.
Right.
It's insane. It's insane. I'm with you, Jackie. We need to let people know about this. Thank you very much for the call. Tony in Watsonville, California. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, salutations, Mr. Hartman.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a question about abortions. Since corporations are considered people, when would abortion of a corporation, would that be illegal?
That's a good
question. And what
question.
about foreign corporations?
If you close down a division of your corporation, is that considered an abortion?
Yes, since they're people.
This Supreme Court's logic is just so. I mean, that was the basis of their 2010 Citizens United decision: is that corporations are persons, and and now they want to give fetuses personhood as well, but not so much for regular people. Tony, thank you very much. Katie in Hamul, California. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Well, just on a really light note, I got my Citizens Abroad Australian ballot yesterday, and it's over. It's a federal election, and it's over 3.5 feet long because of the 22 different parties. But anyway,
wow, that's right. You're married to an Australian. You're an Australian citizen now, aren't you, Katie?
Well, I'm a dual citizen. I'm primarily an American. I'm 74, and 64 of those years were here. So anyway, what I want to do, I went with our money, what we have is in the credit union, and I went to an advisor last week, this week, and now I'm going to see another one because of other reasons, and she didn't know who Jerome Powell was. So I said, I got to do something before Jerome Powell gets frisky again, and she said, who's that? So I'm going, oh, dear. So I've been discussing, I said, well, where do you get your financial information? She said, Sean Hannity. So anyway, she was very nice, but she said, this is a little complicated. You need to see our specialist, and I'll make an appointment for next week. And I'll sit there and explain things.
So what you're talking about here is trying to inflation-proof your savings? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah. I mean, I got onto these I-bonds. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah, but the limit is $10,000.
Right, I know. But listen, what I want to have from you really quickly is like on a 3x5 card, I want to know, I have like too much information and a total inability to process it. So when I meet with these women this next week, I want like Thom Hartmann's, wink, wink, just like 3 ways that's better to handle this unique inflation, unique because we've never had a plague before. And do you have that?
Well, sure. Number one, we just have to recognize that just like after World War II, whenever the economy is bouncing back from more than a year or two of suppressed demand, there will be a surge in demand, and that surge in demand will produce temporary inflation, number one.
I actually wrote that one down when you said it the other day.
So
okay.
you just kind of hold your breath and make it through. Katie, I'll have to finish this on the other side of the break. I'm sorry, I didn't see that break coming.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back, 18 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Okay, Katie, just to finish this conversation, number one, there's some things you just can't do anything about, and that part of the inflation you can't do anything about. Number two, you've got corporations that are showing larger profits than they have literally ever shown in history, and they're raising prices. And they're able to do that because of monopolies, because Reagan in 1983 stopped enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act and the other anti-monopoly laws, the Clayton Act from 1927, the 1957, I think it was just simply called the Anti-Monopoly Law of 1957. He stopped enforcing these laws. Excuse me. And so we need to break up some of these big monopolies so that they actually have competition, because they're able to do this because they have no competition. That's number two. Number three, the Fed is raising interest rates. The Fed probably should raise interest rates because you don't want interest rates to be in negative territory. It is stimulative of the economy and it will produce some inflation. But I think that they're doing it way too fast and way too far. And they need to be doing it in quarter-point increments, and they need to be doing it more slowly. They had dropped it down to deal with an emergency. We are still arguably in that emergency. We're just slowly emerging from it, actually fairly rapidly emerging from it. But so number three, and let's see, how to deal with inflation. I guess that would be it. There are ways that you can personally deal with inflation. Although right now it's really difficult. I got my Aiden Forecast newsletter yesterday, and they were talking about how, don't invest in bonds right now because as interest rates go up, bond values goes down. Don't invest in the stock market because as interest rates go up, the stock market crashes. If you keep your money in cash, it's going to lose value because of inflation. Gold and silver, which is, kind of a safe haven, are just all over the map right now. And so nobody really knows. In terms of investment advice, I don't even know where to begin with that. So, 21 minutes past the hour. Richard in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to bring back up an idea mentioned to you a while back, and I was hoping you'd really ponder on it. That is, in America, making paternity mandatory. The man must financially support a child he creates, helps create until, pick the age, 18, 21. Right. But I would love to see that like income tax. Just make it a money thing. People have no idea the cost of a child and what burden. The woman puts her life on the line just giving birth.
Right.
But and God forbid any medical problem with that child, the numbers are huge. And I think if men had to do that and it was a law and that it was collected somewhat like income tax is collected. All of us pay income tax. Mm-hmm. That type of a crunch, if you will, I think it'd be kind of a form of birth control, actually. But in reality, I don't see how 10 Republicans are so many. I don't know how they could avoid voting for that, given that they're willing to do what they're going to do to women.
They would call it the war on men. They're already doing that. Tucker Carlson's got a whole video series about the war on men, the Democratic war on men, and how you have to tan your testicles and stuff like that. They would go nuts. But Richard, I think you're onto something. It would be a funny rebuttal. Richard, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero-emission by 2040, and said, okay, what will happen if we do this? They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable, the American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back, 24 minutes past the hour, and picking up your calls, MJ in Seattle. Hey, MJ, what's up?
Oh, I am going to wish you, everybody, happy Mother's Day. And my remark is that the greatest demographic in women that they can find is that most people looking for an abortion are already mothers. Yes. They already know what it's taking from them, what they need to give to bring up a child, and they're making the decision that they can't do the right thing by their current family by adding to it, and it's so painful. They already know about the love and care and the wonderful life of being with children, and they have to make a decision. It isn't gone, you know. And I just want to say that I'm thinking of this as a war on women, and it's just throughout every choice and thing that you must do as a human being, education, church, economics. It's and so to have Tucker Carlson calling it a war on men is just, you know, that's going on is just crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, it's another example of straight white power, basically. Mostly right. Male straight white power. But anyhow, back to you, MJ.
Right. Well, I'm finding I've discovered an idea about what you're calling people going crazy on each other because Trump came into office, and there's I found it in philosophical literature. Nietzsche and Schiller in the 1800s used this word resentiment. It's close to resentment, but of course it's translated from German and so on. But it's a kind of grudge mentality that appears to come in right at the level of trauma, where it gets driven into the personality. So that whatever comes up, here's another fact that plays into this, and that blaming is a form of releasing pain. So this, you know, that's my comment.
That's fascinating stuff, MJ. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And happy Mother's Day. And
thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Mother's Day is Sunday, so it's going to be quite a weekend. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Big explosion in Havana. Apparently a hotel blew up. Not a good thing, but it's at the top of the news right now. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Hannah Arendt's book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I've, known about this book, read little pieces of it for decades. I mean, it's the classic work on totalitarianism. It's long and there's a lot of words in it, but for this moment, Elliot Lustig was tweeting recently about Donald Trump. This is back when Donald Trump was talking about 3 to 5 million illegal immigrants voting, right? And he said, Hannah Arendt, in her book, The Origin of Totalitarianism, provides a helpful guide for interpreting the language of fascists. She noted how decent liberals of 1930s Germany would fact-check the Nazis' bizarre claims about things like Jews as if they were meant to be factual. What they failed to understand, Arendt suggests, is that the Nazi Jew-hating was not a statement of fact, but a declaration of intent. So when someone would blame the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, naive people would counter by saying, there's no evidence of that. What the Nazis were doing was not describing what was true, but what would have to be true in order to justify what they planned to do next. So did 3 million illegals cast vote in the election? Clearly not, but fact-checking is just a way of playing along with their game. What Trump is saying is not that 3 million illegals voted. What he's saying is, I'm going to steal the voting rights of millions of Americans. So that's kind of a contemporary frame for this book. So let's read from the book itself. Here, this is from page 348. And she's talking about totalitarian movements and how they use propaganda, how they communicate with the public, and the difference between terror and propaganda, the kind of terror that they can inculcate by just kind of randomly arresting people. Pretty much everybody's committed some kind of crime at some point, right? Arresting people, and on the one hand, that's the terror, or convincing the people. These totalitarian movements use socialism and racism by emptying them of their utilitarian content, the interests of a class or a nation. The form of infallible protection in which these concepts were presented has become more important than their content. The chief qualification of a mass leader has become unending infallibility. He can never admit an error. The assumption of infallibility, moreover, is based not so much on superior intelligence as on the correct interpretation of the essentially reliable forces in history and nature, forces which neither defeat nor ruin can prove wrong because they're bound to assert themselves in the long run. Mass leaders in power have one concern which overrides all utilitarian consideration: to make their predictions come true. The Nazis did not hesitate to use, at the end of the war, the concentrated force of their still intact organization to bring about as complete a destruction of Germany as possible, in order to make true their prediction that the German people would be ruined in case of defeat. The propaganda effect of infallibility, the striking success of posing as a mere interpreting agent of predictable forces, has encouraged in totalitarian dictators the habit of announcing their political intentions in the form of prophecy. The most famous example is Hitler's announcement to the German Reichstag in January 1939, quote, I want today once again to make a prophecy. In case the Jewish financiers succeed one more in hurling the people into a world war, the result will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe, end of quote. Translated into non-totalitarian language, this means, I intend to make war and I intend to kill the Jews of Europe. Similarly, Stalin, in the great speech before the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1930, in which he prepared the physical liquidation of intra-party right and left deviationists, described them as representatives of dying classes. This definition not only gave the argument its specific sharpness, but also announced in totalitarian style the physical destruction of those whose dying out had just been prophesied. In both instances, the same objective is accomplished. The liquidation is fitted into a historical process in which man not only suffers, or does or suffers what, according to some immutable law, is bound to happen anyway. As soon as the execution of the victims has been carried out, the prophecy becomes a retrospective alibi. Nothing happened but what has already been predicted. It does not matter whether the laws of history spell the doom of the classes and their representatives, or whether the laws of nature exterminate all those elements, democracies, Jews, Eastern subhumans, the Untermenschen, or the incurably sick. They are not fit to live anyway. Incidentally, Hitler, too, spoke of dying classes that ought to be, quote, eliminated without much ado, end quote. This method, like other totalitarian propaganda methods, is foolproof only after the movements have seized power. Then all debate about the truth or falsity of a totalitarian dictator's prediction is as weird as arguing with a potential murderer about whether his future victim is dead or alive, since by killing the person in question, the murderer can provide prompt proof of the correctness of his statement. The only valid argument under such conditions is promptly to rescue the person whose death has been predicted. Before mass leaders seize the power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts. As such, for, in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the man who can fabricate it. The assertion that the Moscow subway is the only one in the world is a lie only so long as the Bolsheviks have not the power to destroy all the others. In other words, the method of infallible prediction, more than any other totalitarian propaganda device, works. In the book, Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Remember Paul Manafort? He used to be business partners with Roger Stone back in the day, working for Republican politicians like, Nixon and Reagan. And, well, in 2004, he took a really sweet gig over in Ukraine, helping the Russians, President Putin, install Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine, a nice Putin puppet. That same year, though, the people of Ukraine said enough, and basically Yanukovych got driven out of the country. So they tried it again in 2010. Let's bring, this Putin puppet back into Ukraine, Yanukovych. And it worked until 2014 when they got kicked out. So he gets kicked out of Ukraine, Manafort. So what does he do the next year, 2015? He decides to run the Trump campaign. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Yeah, could be. Okay, there's an entire video that outlines this whole timeline over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your calls on Anything Goes Friday. John in Seattle. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Tom, thanks. Thanks for squeezing me in. Well, Alito says that abortion is not in the Constitution. I don't think corporations are in the Constitution either, and I think Ralph Nader wrote a letter to Scalia when Scalia was still alive, asking how he reconciled his strict constructionism with that fact. I know you've written on corporations. Do you have thoughts on that item?
Yeah, driving is not in the Constitution, but you have a right, to transport yourself. Eating is not in the Constitution, but you have a right to eat. Having sex is not in the Constitution, but you have a right to have sex. Alito saying that abortion is not in the Constitution is absurd. I mean, it's just, I've read the draft opinion, and you're right. He does say that, and he uses that as part of his rationale for saying, therefore, we're going to strike down a right to abortion. It's simply wrong. I don't know how to say it beyond that, John. There's a whole pile, a long list of things that are not in the Constitution that we still have rights to, and I would refer people to the 9th and 10th Amendments on those. The 9th Amendment in particular, which says that just because rights are not enumerated in the Constitution doesn't mean that the people don't possess them. And, my language, not the 9th Amendments, but you can read it in the 9th Amendment. John, thank you for the call. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, happy birthday, Tom, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Last week as the show was ending, I was decrying the decision of that Trump-appointed district judge for upending the CDC national policy to require masks on planes and transit. Right. And, it'll be interesting to see how many hospitalizations and deaths result from her decision. But all that kind of seems like that judicial overreach seems like small potatoes compared to what the Supreme Court is getting ready to do. And, you kind of presaged this leak with your piece last Friday about Connecticut considering the Fugitive Women Act, and people should check out your Hartmann report from last Friday. But let's not forget, Tom. The Supreme Court, they're interfering with and their dismantling of our democracy goes back to Bush v. Gore, because if that Florida recount had been allowed to proceed, Gore would have been president, and Alito never would have been appointed. And as a side note, I think you've said both Roberts and Kavanaugh were part of the infamous Brooks Brothers riot that disrupted the vote recount in Miami.
They weren't part of the riot. They were advisors to the Bush team on legal strategy because they had both clerked for Roberts had clerked for Rehnquist, and I don't recall who Kavanaugh had clerked for, but they were advising Bush on legal strategy.
Yeah, so they were in on it. So, and but the question is, what are we as Democrats going to do with this fumble, this leak? It's definitely a drop ball. You can tell by the way they're going off on that. And are we going to pick up the ball and run with it? And to do that, I think we need a strong progressive agenda. President Biden needs to start talking about expanding the court just like FDR did in the 30s. And Democrats need to show unwavering solidarity with women, other marginalized people, with workers, with youth climate activists. That was a great interview you did with the Starbucks union organizers yesterday. And let's remember, Tom, where Hillary failed and Biden succeeded was when Biden more openly embraced and adopted Bernie's progressive populism. That's the way you reject right-wing populism, the kind that Trump and DeSantis espouse. So, this is no time for centrism, and we got to start now. We can support progressive candidates like here in Oregon. She's not in my district, but people need to get out and vote for Jamie McLeod Skinner instead of Kurt Schrader. And down in Texas, somebody was mentioning yesterday that Jessica Cisneros, she's a strong progressive woman running against an anti-choice Democrat. Henry Cuellar.
Yeah, he's the last, apparently the last anti-abortion Democrat in the House. Here's some good news for you, Jeff. Apropos of your, I don't know if your question was literal or rhetorical, but what's the best way for Democrats to respond to this? I just got an email, literally just like during the last break, from Rick Scott from the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the NRSC. And, with an eye toward midsummer Supreme Court decision Dobbs v. Jackson, the NRSC has conducted public opinion research on abortion to help Republicans address this issue and combat potential attacks from Democrats. And then he goes on, he says the research is still ongoing, blah, blah, blah. But here's the main takeaways. I just have to read this to you. This is the headline, the subhead here, forcefully refute Democrat lies regarding GOP positions on abortion and women's health care. Joe Biden and the Democrats have and will continue to spread lies about where Republicans stand on abortion and women's health care. The facts, Republicans do not, and I know you can't see it, but do not is in all caps. Republicans do not want to take away contraception. Republicans do not want to take away mammograms or other health care provided specifically to women. Republicans do not want to throw doctors and women in jail. Mothers should be held harmless under the law. While down in Louisiana, they're actually debating whether or not women who get abortions should get the death penalty. and then he goes on, call Democrats out for using obsession over abortion to avoid talking about their record. Democrats hold extreme views on abortion that are out of the mainstream, but their other policies are so absurd they'd rather talk about abortion. Biden and the Democrats are making every American poorer, less safe, more dependent on other countries for energy, and weaker. And so, in other words, change the subject as fast as you can. I think the metaphor is apt. They are the dog that finally caught the car, and they don't know what the hell to do with it. And the car is a whole lot bigger and stronger than they are.
Yeah, so. and like I say, this leak, I really think it's a fumble on their part, and they realize that because it gives us time to organize. Otherwise, they were ready to steamroll us in November, and which would help them lock down 2024. So let's take this as the gift that it is. I mean, it's a terrible
Well, if it ends up resolving this contentious decision, this contentious issue once and for all, it'll be a gift for everybody, I think. Jeff, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hi, I'd like to talk about some of those crazy Democratic policies that have gotten us into so much trouble. Number one, Biden I think he just hit 8 million jobs created in the last year and 4 or 5 months. That's a record. And he's on a pace I had predicted previously that Biden might see as many as 30 to 40 million jobs created in 2 presidential terms. He's on pace to do that, even with the Fed stepping up and doing what he's doing. And even with the liberal biased media constantly talking about recession, constantly talking about the Fed is going to increase the Fed rate. We're going to talk about 75 basis points. And all of this stuff that they're doing is basically what Republicans always do, and our liberal biased media, which is a Republican media.
Right.
What they do is they try to talk the economy down, and they're trying to
when Democrats are in office. When Trump was in office, they were lying through their teeth about the
when Republicans are in office, it's the greatest economy since in the history of mankind.
Right.
Whenever, so they're trying to talk the economy down. They're trying to destroy consumer confidence, and they've been doing something that I consider to be really egregious. They have been telling our corporations that the American people are cash drunk. They're just sitting on this cash, basically. 1.5 trillion, the amount of money that Biden gave the American people when he first came in office. They're sitting on that money, and what they're doing when they say that is they're telling all of these corporations, you can raise your prices.
Of course,
the American people out there, they got the money. Go after that money, raise prices. I am also convinced that the inflation that we're seeing is an after effect of what Donald Trump did when he put that. He spent something in the neighborhood of $8 trillion. The Fed added an additional $4 trillion while Donald was in office, giving us $12 trillion plus dollars just thrown out there, and most of it just money that was printed. What that did is it gave these corporations an incentive to raise prices and still have a healthy profit.
Right, and Trump also didn't have any, when Trump passed out $1 trillion, he didn't have any protections on that. The best guess right now is a half a trillion of that, 500 billion of it, was stolen by Trump's buddies.
And additionally, it wasn't just that, I forget how much it was, that one of these trucking companies that was affiliated with Donald Trump, they took a huge chunk of money, and now they're trying to get that money back because there was nothing but a fraud. Yep. But you have this situation where Donald Trump, $12 trillion given to mostly rich people and they're sitting on that money also. And now the media is telling all of these corporations, hey, go ahead and raise your prices because the American people have the money.
Right.
But the most telling thing that you can look at is that those food lines, and Biden mentioned this. When Biden took office, Donald Trump's economy had 3-mile-long food lines all over America where people didn't have enough money to eat. And even with the inflation that we're seeing right now, those food lines haven't showed up again.
Yep. And a fine thing it is. You're absolutely right, Larry. I had completely forgotten about that. You're absolutely right. And none of this gets talked about in the media, generally speaking. Yeah. So good on you, Larry, for putting it all in front of us. Thank you. It is 46 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. It's talk media for the sane among us, the Thom Hartmann Program. We will be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls in just a second. Stick around. And welcome back. Bobby in La Puente, California. Hey, Bobby, what's on your mind today?
I want to thank you for the show the whole week, you and your crew. And God bless the women to the Four Directions. Happy Mother's Day to your mothers. Mother's Day is every day, in my opinion. And it's very emotional for me. Mixed bag in emotions, but good. Then you got to share your story, Tom, about the unions, how you grew up. Getting cheese, powdered milk, mead, putting cardboard in my holes in my shoes. So, I enjoyed it. Really, we relate. I got a brother named John. And, wow. And then your dad, door to door, making a living. Your mother there. Wow. It hits me. You know what I mean? And union jobs, and you got a TV.
Yes.
Shoes.
Yeah, I remember
Wow.
when we got our first TV. It was the most amazing thing. It was like, wow.
Really?
I'd seen when my
Yeah.
grandmother had one. You know, I knew what they were like, and some of my friends had them, but we'd never had one before 1956 or 57.
That's what a union does. For me, honestly, people out there, I'd be in the penitentiary or dead. I swear to God.
If it wasn't for the union.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I got a pension, no high school diploma. For people out there who are organizing, bless the organizers. Those that don't have a diploma, don't get on yourself. Union does discriminate.
Yep.
Right?
I'm with you. I'm with you. Well said,
Thank you,
Bobby.
Tom. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. Rob in Rochester, New York. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom?
Good.
Yeah, the other day I saw on the news somewhere, I don't recall exactly where, that one of the long-haul COVID symptoms they saw when they looked at the brains of people who passed of COVID, they have serious, like, micro lesions in their frontal lobe. So
Which is where you inhibit behavior. It's so you become more impulsive and less restrained if you've had COVID, which makes you wonder about Putin and Trump and et cetera. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I have ADD, and I've read 3 of your books, and it makes me wonder if somebody who's normal all of a sudden has a frontal lobe problem that's similar to someone with ADD, or maybe even worse. Then if they have access to a gun, which a lot of people have access to guns, and the murder rate goes up. And then if the light turns yellow, you slam the hammer down. I can make it, and then all of a sudden you're running a red light and you're T-boning somebody, and people die because of. And these accidents are up. My auto body guy is like he's got to find extra space for cars now because he doesn't have the room on his lot. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just think it's.
Well, part of that is that, for a couple of years, people were reluctant to show up just because they didn't want to get exposed to COVID. But an awful lot of it is that people are getting back on the road. They haven't been driving, or they're just a little nutty. I mean, it's just like, I'm free at last.
And I was wondering also, wouldn't you think it would be a coup if Jenny Thomas was the leaker?
Yes. It wouldn't surprise me either.
And thank you for doing what you do. No, it wouldn't surprise me either because it was so late. If it was somebody who was progressive, they would have leaked it already, like in late February, maybe March.
No, I believe these, the other leak coming out of the Supreme Court is that Brett Kavanaugh was the guy who was thinking of going with John Roberts and saying, we're not going to entirely end Roe. We're just going to say 15 weeks in Mississippi is fine with us. But
she wants to right the ship, and she leaked this, or somebody did. I think
may well be. It may well be. It could have been Ginny. Rob, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back with more of your calls in just a second. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. They often say that Republican Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, is the stupidest guy in the entire United States Senate. I get it. Tommy Tuberville gives him a run for his money, but he just came out with what has to be at least the very stupidest idea of the year. Ron Johnson is proposing, there's a shortage of child care workers right now in America. There's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. But he has proposed a solution. His suggestion, any woman in America who's getting any kind of public assistance, you're getting food stamps, you're getting, tuition relief, whatever it may be, you would be forced to go into daycare centers and care for children. Yeah, seriously. This is Ron Johnson's idea. People who had no training, and one of his assistants said, well, it's just like teachers who teach at public schools where their own kids attend. No, it's not. These are not trained professionals. There's no union. This is nuts. There's a whole video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, picking up your calls. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to share my experience of having lost babies in different ways and what it did to me and what they would do to me.
Okay.
When I was in my mid-20s, I tried to conceive. My husband and I both were tested for infertility. He had motility count tests, and I had all kinds of tests. They finally gave me a test called histocell Pentagram. It's when they inject dye into your tubes, and under X-ray they watch as it comes out to see how fast it comes out. And if it doesn't come out, oh, wait a minute, they don't take that into consideration. But if it doesn't come out, you cramp and you convulse, and you are definitely not going to have babies soon because your tubes are blocked.
Right.
That was what happened to me.
I see.
I had surgery, and they opened up both of my tubes. Within 3 months, I got pregnant. After 4 months, I miscarried. 6 months after that, I was pregnant again, but this one was a keeper. So I went into Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. I think people might have heard of that. For an ultrasound when I was 5 months pregnant. Fainted in the lobby. I woke up surrounded by doctors, and they told me I had an ectopic pregnancy.
Oh, no, it was outside the tube.
They explained that it was in my fallopian tube. It was in my fallopian tube, and it was outside the uterus, and it needed to be removed immediately, or I might die. They rolled me into a gurney, put me in a hall in the maternity ward. No private room, so I was in the hall for hours with cries of newborns coming from the rooms near me. I sobbed for hours until they came in and removed my baby. Yeah. I had one more ectopic pregnancy before I had a healthy baby girl. I was seeing double complications. The umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, but didn't stop her.
So is the bottom line here, Lori, that it was a difficult experience for you?
I had another ectopic pregnancy before I finally had to remove it. Remove it. I will say that I would be arrested as a serial killer then, because I lived here in Louisiana before I moved back to Boston, and I know what Louisiana is like, and I would be arrested as a serial killer. Because
they had to surgically remove that. Yeah, I get it. Lori, thank you for sharing your story. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
I was intrigued by the mink coat mob story that the lady called in, so I looked it up. The American Prospect quotes a fascinating book called Dallas 1963, which recounts this incident, which happened 2 days before the 1960 election. Kennedy was in Chicago trying to nail down Illinois, and we saw LBJ down there in Dallas trying to get Texas. Right. This outfit was fomented by one of the Republican representatives, and they did mob them. They hit Lady Bird with signs, and they injured LBJ workers at the banquet site where he was due to speak. Anyway, this was all caught, or most of it was caught by NBC News, and it was flashed coast to coast, and the Democrats were all over it. This incident, according to Nixon, lost him Texas because even though Nixon carried Dallas and those Republicans, the rest of the state went for LBJ and Kennedy. Oh, that's fascinating. You should look it up.
That's interesting. I knew that Texas was, one of the reasons that Kennedy put Texas put Johnson on the ballot was to get Texas. They had to have Texas, and they were not sure that they were going to win Texas right up to Election Day. I didn't realize that this was one of the things that flipped it.
Yeah, look at this book, Dallas 1963. It's quoted in the American Prospect online, and it's fascinating, and it was all caught on TV.
Wow, I'll check it out. Susan, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of you everybody who's called, thank you for being with us today and all this week. And special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabbermocky, Jay LeBlanc, Al Gorilla Rhythm, Connor Arroyo, and Carne Verde. Thank you all. The great folks who help make this program work and run our little chat room over there on YouTube and everything else. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. We'll see you on Monday. And happy Mother's Day, too, to all the moms out there. See you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Question.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at CozyEarth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmanReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
We stay